One late night in the summer of 1974, a 30-year-old man named Fred stood inside of a loud casino in Las Vegas, feeling incredibly nervous. He knew what he was about to do was a horrible idea. Fred grabbed a huge wad of cash out of his pocket, and as he looked at it, he thought about the reason he was here. So Fred had actually flown to Las Vegas on a whim after a bad meeting with a group of investors. So Fred had founded this small company 3 years earlier, and he really needed a loan from these investors, but they had said no. Fred had actually already lost over $13 million to this point, and this was a huge problem for Fred because right now, in all of his company accounts, he had a total of $5,000. He needed to pay his fuel bill for his company, which was $24,000, and that bill was due soon. And besides the fuel bill, he also didn't have any money to make payroll, and if he didn't find a way to find more money, he would have to file for bankruptcy, shut his business down, and lay off all of his employees. He totally believed in this company. Now, it was about to collapse. Unless he got really lucky, Fred didn't know if he'd be celebrating or sobbing by the end of this night. All he knew was he was out of options here. Fred began walking over to a blackjack table because someone had told him that of all the games you could play in the Las Vegas casino, the game with the best odds was blackjack. He exchanged all his cash for chips. Then, Fred began to play. For the first few hands, Fred was pretty cautious, only placing small bets. But he won all those small bets, and so he began placing larger bets. And he began winning those bets too. And in fact, it got to the point where he was winning so consistently that a crowd of strangers had formed behind the table just to watch Fred. But Fred wasn't even aware of the crowd behind him. And eventually, he got to a place where he had a mountain of chips in front of him, and he was gambling huge sums of it all at once. Fred decided this was it. He was going to double down and go all in. And so he puts all these chips out, and he waits, and eventually the dealer flips over their cards. And as soon as they did, the crowd around Fred, who he hadn't even noticed to this point, erupted in cheers because Fred had just won. And when the dealer pushed all the chips back over to him and he got to count how much money he had, he realized he had started with $5,000, but now had $27,000. He had gambled and won $27,000 was just enough to pay that fuel bill and keep his company running a little bit longer. He was able to secure $11 million in investor funding, which was enough money to finally scale up this small business into the behemoth that we know it as today. Fred went from being a guy betting his last chips at a casino to now being a multi-billionaire. Fred's full name is Fred Smith, and that little company that he scaled up on a gamble was FedEx.